Grunge aesthetics first emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s, rooted in the alternative rock scene of Seattle. But by the late 1990s and early 2000s, what people often call post-grunge or mainstream grunge-inspired style took hold, blending the raw, anti-fashion ethos of grunge with a more polished commercial edge. Okay, so when it comes to the origins of 90s grunge, majority of the times when you think about grunge and bands that are inspired, that have that kind of grunge look, you think about Nirvana, you think about Pearl Jam and all the things. But for me, it is a bit different just because of the time frame. And I'm more of an early 2000s girl. So I think about Pink. I think Gwen Stefani. I think Drew Barrymore. Like, those are the grunge. Like, they are the aesthetic for me. And also, I can't forget about Avril Lavigne. Even though she's not 90s, I feel like she's more early 2000s, but I was there for her era as well. So the 90s grunge aesthetic rejected the polished glam of the 80s, favoring thrifted, cheap, and layered clothes. So the looks gave like accidental or like this I don't care kind of rugged vibe, but it was very distinctive. So a lot of the clothing would include like flannels, ripped jeans, band tees, combat boots were major, black as well. But I like to say, even though when we think about grunge, we think about dark tones, we think about more neutral, not a lot of color. But I think specifically in the 2000s, I think that's when the grunge aesthetic started to kind of flip. Because I do think you can add a bit of color and still make it grunge. Okay, so let's get into some of the grunge inspired aesthetics in the late 90s and early 2000s. So by the late 90s, grunge had seeped into pop culture and fashion industries, morphing into something more stylized. So around this time, I would say it kind of led to this grunge meets glam aesthetic. So of course, we still had the flannel shirts, slip dresses, ripped jeans, but mixed with chokers, mini skirts, and platform shoes. So it became to get a bit edgier. So think Buffy the Vampire Slayer or early No Doubt Gwen Stefani era. A little edgier, but style for more of a mainstream appeal. And I feel like Gwen Stefani is like the perfect example of like grunge glam, and we're gonna get to her later. Okay, so now let's talk fabrics and textures. So when it came to the fabrics, of course, like I stated previously, the flannel, that was huge. Also distressed denim, so like mom jeans or just ripped jeans in general, that was definitely a major green flag when it came to the grunge look. Corduroy, also mesh, velvet, and even crushed satin. So like those slip dresses that the girls would wear in the 90s with like combat boots, that was definitely a big thing. And also layering, that's also a big part of the grunge aesthetic. So t-shirts over long sleeve, slips over t-shirts, and sweaters tied to the waist. And it was also a little bit like skater coated. I always kind of link skate culture with like grunge aesthetic just because they're just similarities within it when it comes to like the clothing. Okay, so now let's talk color palette. So the color palette is typically dark and moody. So think blacks, grays, forest greens, burgundies, and navies. But as I stated, when it starts to cross over to that Y2K era, early 2000s, the colors get a bit brighter. And so of course, that's the classic grunge aesthetic, just dark, moody, just think dark. And when it came to the hair and makeup, the hair was typically messy and unkempt. Middle parts are dyed in streak color styles. Bleach tips, dark roots, you guys know the era that I'm talking about. Even the spikes, I would include the spikes into the grunge era because I feel like grunge and like that rock and roll they're very similar. So definitely that style, classic, definitely Y2K. Then also when it came to the makeup, think smudged eyeliner, frosted lips, especially in the early 2000s. Dark lipstick carried over from the 90s grunge era. So dark lipstick, we already know the vibes. Dark reds or even blacks. Plums, that was the total aesthetic when it came to the makeup. Okay, so let's talk pop stars and commercial grunge during this era. So as I stated, Gwen Stefani, specifically in her No Doubt era, so late 90s. She mixed ska punk and grunge influences, so think plaid pants, crop tops, bendies, and bleach blonde hair. She made the look more colorful and glamorous as compared to the traditional grunge aesthetic that I spoke on earlier. She added color, and I think that's what I enjoyed most about Gwen Stefani. Like, she was her to the core, even though she did adapt some styles from different cultures. We're not gonna talk about that. But she definitely contributed to the crossover when it came to pop star grunge glam and having that commercial appeal when it came to like mainstream media. And even looking back at her style in the late 90s and early 2000s, like the outfits that she wore, I would absolutely wear. Even though grunge is like not the style that I go for, the looks that she was mixing and matching back in the 90s were elite. So Gwen Stefani is definitely one of those girls when it comes to just that punk glamour aesthetic in the 90s. Okay, speaking of 90s crossover and glamour, let's get into the movie realm. So Drew Barrymore was huge in shaping how grunge aesthetics crossed into mainstream fashion and pop culture. What made her so influential was that she embodied the bad girl, carefree spirit vibe of the 90s, and her style was a mix of authentic grunge, vintage thrift, and playful Hollywood glam. She often wore slip dresses, baby doll dresses, and in lingerie-inspired pieces, but paired them with chunky boots or a messy cardigan. She was also known to wear chokers, daisy accessories, and dark lipsticks. She wore a lot of deep reds, browns, and purples. Like those were definitely her signatures in the 90s. And I love that she stuck to it because like she reminds me, if you've seen Charlie's Angels, even in that movie, she had a grunge edge to her. She had like this carefree spirit, like she was the super cool one. And it definitely matches how her look was in the 90s, like in real life. So I love that that crossover actually works. Pink was also really heavy into the grunge aesthetic. I mean, when it came to the hairstyles, the hair color, all the changes, even her earlier swag, Pink was definitely engulfed in that grunge slash rock aesthetic, I would say. It was a combination of both. And of course, I did forget to mention we have to talk about footwear as well. So we already know Doc Martens classic elite boot. I love a good Doc Marten because they stand the test of time. So Doc Martens were very heavy, especially during that grunge era. Converse, Vans, and then also combat boots as well. Vans kind of fit into like that skateboard era, so we can add Vans on there. And then also platforms became huge in the early 2000s. So like buffalo shoes and like chunky boots. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. But I think my favorite grunge would be definitely combat boots or a good Doc Marten, Converse, Van type of vibe. Overall, grunge shifted from counterculture rebellion to Hollywood glam rebellion to pop punk Y2K revival. Its core, a rejection of polishing perfection, remained, but it continually morphed as fashion and pop culture repackaged its edge for new audiences. Let me know your thoughts in the comments of grunge aesthetic. Like, is it yay or nay? Is this coming back? Do you guys see glimpses of this in high fashion? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I've always been a fan of the grunge look. I've never really put it into practice per se, but I definitely get the grunge vibe.